Welcome back to the studio. I'm your co-host, Noelle Fakori, and joining me is CEO of VaynerMedia, Gary Vee. Gary, it's so good to have you. Thanks for being here on the live stream.
Thank you for having me.
So the last time we got to speak, it was 2016, Empire State Building.
Yes.
We brought you in for our New York City employees.
Yes.
And I have to say that it is still talked about, and I'm so excited that we now have you on this global live stream instead. Yes, exactly.
Well, that's flattering and it's good. Hello, everybody watching in other places.
It's so good to have you. So we have a lot of things that we want to talk about. I have my own questions. The live stream sent in dozens of questions. So I want to jump into a place that you play in really well, which is being an innovator and obviously shaking things up that need to be shooken up. So when we talk about the talent space,
Yes.
I'm curious to hear from you, within the whole world of talent, what's something that you think needs to be revisited, and how would you shake it up if you could?
I think kindness needs to be a humongous variable in the way that people hire.
Yeah.
I believe that emotional intelligence, EQ, empathy, gratitude, humility are disproportionately the most important variables in talent. That I on the record, and we'll say this on stage and have continued to say it, that I believe that your actual core skill set is a secondary variable to who you are as a human being and the way you make your coworkers feel. I genuinely do. VaynerMedia is referred to as a honey empire. And I want everybody to hear this very, very clearly. Honey empire. Honey over vinegar. Actually, this is incredible. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but this morning, somebody was let go from VaynerMedia.
Okay.
This individual, I won't even go him or her, this individual has been quite successful in driving quite a bit of revenue for our company. This individual was not shocked this morning when they were let go, because as soon as we laid out our full belief in our 360 evaluation, top, bottom, left, right, that they do not uphold kindness and empathy and gratitude towards their teammates, that this individual has been around long enough, and we've absolutely, whether someone's a good performer or a bad performer, even we want to make quick decisions if they may not be right, but we want to reconcile and try to fix at all costs.
Right.
Sometimes to a fault. I think at some level we created a culture of entitlement because of it at our worst. Nonetheless, not to go too long-winded, we let go we have 900 employees, we let go a top 7 revenue generator today because the person was making other people not feel awesome. And it was a far less debated exit. And that meant to me today, and it's a highly emotional person, hence some of the stuff that we're referring to. It means, wow, people are starting to really believe me in this dictatorship of honey empire. And the word empire's in there. We're trying to build the biggest company in the world. I believe emotional skills will trump revenue skills in the next half century. Once we can measure it better. Once we can measure it better. Or once we put more empaths at the top.
So it requires a lot of not just talking the talk, but that's very clearly walking the walk and making those tough decisions. Is that something, as you've built a company, has always been that clear or easy, or has it been an evolution over time to be able to be that clear?
It's been very clear. I've been clear. My bleeding heart for even the person that was breaking my own religion didn't allow me to move as quickly as I needed to at times, which created the sense for some that it was baloney that I cared about that. And at my best, I get the timing perfect, which I feel great about, let's say today's, because I think we just, at my worst, somebody's in the building 6 to 12 months too long, which then creates a lack of trust that I live HR. I'm an HR-driven CEO. And I've said that for a long time, long before it was cool and long before I had to give a talk here. So that's your actual answer. That even though this is my North Star, my execution over the last 20 years has been varied based on the fact that at my worst, I hate the conflict and the feeling of firing someone, and I'll lean into, I can reconcile her or him. Me. And that has not always been the case.
Right. And I can see how a lot of leaders, whether they be in the talent space, whether they're managers, go through that, and figuring out how to reconcile it or solve for it tends to be a battle and a struggle, and far more of an art than a science in many ways.
And you have two people in the audience. You have the ones that are completely financially CFO driven. And even if they're the most lovely person, their blind religion is the P&L. And if we didn't have a good quarter and we have 6 people, like I got to cut 47,000 out of the system and like you. And that's it.
Yeah.
Then you have other people who are more towards me, though thank God I have enough P&L that I don't go out of business. It's really altruistic.
Yeah.
And they're not making any decision based on anything other than trying to reconcile it. And so one creates entitlement, the other creates fear. And that's why the far majority of businesses are off balance.
So when it comes to bringing in great talent into VaynerMedia, what has been your process? So that way you're not just doing the traditional like 10 years of management experience check, but you're actually validating for those different pieces that you mentioned there, whether it be the kindness and so on and so forth.
I'm sorry, you might have seen me, I'm like smiling.
Yes.
I'm about to say something that I don't know. One of the things I like to do when I do speeches or interviews is I try to bring the most value to the listener.
Yeah.
So I'm hedging. I'm not sure what I'm about to say is very valuable.
Okay.
Because it's quite unique. I am an all-time enigma when it comes to hiring. I hire immediately on intuition without knowing any data.
Really?
But I'm also willing to then say I made a mistake and then reconcile the exit.
Okay.
Which has made me, however, I genuinely still believe that that's better than what most people do, which is they go super rigid, then have ego in their ability to hire, which means they don't want to fire because they don't want to admit the mistake.
Yeah.
When I tell you of the 900 employees that work for me, outside of the fact that occasionally they wear on a Friday a sweatshirt or a hat because they're supporting the team on that Monday, on that Saturday, or because March Madness is such a big thing at VaynerMedia that people fill out their brackets and pick their alma mater, I have no concept of what school anybody went to. I have never called a reference in my career.
Okay.
Because I believe that that's a PR function, not a truth. I don't look at the resume prior to sitting down. However, I will ask, what have you done?
Right.
But I lean way too intuitive for the practical nature of business. However, everything I just said needs some sprinkling into the rigid nature of acquiring talent.
Do you find that that style works more for some people in their build than others, whether
Yes.
it be introverts versus extroverts? And how
It's
do you
less of an
manage
introvert
that?
extrovert. I think it's just a style of what you value. I find a lot of introverts to be incredibly empathetic and have a lot of emotional intelligence. They just may not feel comfortable being external communicators.
Yeah.
So I think it's people building businesses their way. And then I think they grow up and they go public or pre-IPO or just raise a lot of capital. And then they start bringing in the school stuff.
Yeah.
There's a lot of school stuff at this conference, the way it's supposed to be. Everybody wants to talk about feelings and good stuff, but that's not how they're executing. And reviews are a disaster. It's subjective calls based on managers.
Yeah.
There's so much going on in this is my favorite. When I tell you that this is maybe the most excited I've ever been to give a talk in the history of my 1,000 talks in the last decade, I'm so grateful to be here. I'm so grateful to be on the show. I believe that this issue is the number one conversation in business.
Yeah.
That this is not about checking the box for diversity and inclusion, that this is actually proper intent. We are appeasing the current state of political correctness. We are not leading with the intent of humanity.
Yeah.
And if we led with the intent of humanity, we'd be having far more thoughtful conversations than pie charts of checking a box that we all want to make ourselves feel good about. Are we human? Or are we just robotic? And the answer is we're robotic because most businesses have to hit numbers every 90 days. And the person in charge of that has selfish financial needs.
Yeah.
And so she or he will navigate that.
Yeah.
And that's what's actually happening. And so I think that there's a far more 3.0 conversation that needs to evolve. And I'm hoping that the diversity, inclusion, and some of the other great things that are being talked about are a precursor to a conversation around humanity.
Yeah.
Because humanity is the undertone, the intent of the humanity of your organization, I think will lead to far better execution.
I love that. So someone who I have been following for a while, I've been following you since I found out about you in 2014, and then recently, about the last 2 years, is your Chief Heart Officer, Claude, who I find fascinating.
Yes.
And what's really cool is to actually get this behind the scenes look at like what your relationship looks like as a CHRO and a CEO. So can you tell us a little bit around what that looks like, how it's morphed over time, and how you make sure that you're being HR culture first with her?
I think what's really interesting about what's worked for me in my self-awareness, and everybody has to do that if they run something, is I am the kind of person who's willing to sit down with Claude and eat crystals because we believe in crystals. I don't believe in crystals, but that's only because I don't know anything about crystals yet, but I know they're in the consciousness. The fact that I could eat crystals with Claude and then walk into my next meeting with Alan, my CFO, and make real operational financial decisions is incredibly interesting to me.
Yeah.
I find it also incredibly interesting, and I give enormous kudos to the humility of Alan, who's a CFO of a big company who recognizes that tie goes to the runner to Claude. That is unheard of. When I deliver that line, if I deliver it, because I'm going to go all improv in my speech, if I deliver that actual line in that room today, and they actually believe me, which would matter, that is the brain twist of the whole thing. That if you actually, what is the relationship? Claude is the single most important executive at Vayner besides me. And the decision making goes through her. Now, if we're not gonna make payroll next week, Alan would trump Claude. But luckily I don't think that's necessarily ever gonna be the case. I'm good enough at managing cash flow.
Yeah.
Claude has the loudest voice in the room.
It's so interesting. So let's say we have a room of CEOs, because I can imagine everybody in HR who's listening to you speak right now is like, yes, finally, how do I get my leader to hear this and believe this? If we have a room full of CEOs,
First we have to have empathy. If your leader, if she or he is the CEO of a company that is publicly traded and held accountable to a phone call every 90 days where she has to talk about things that are gonna judge the stock, and the board will fire her if she comes out and says some foofy stuff about feelings and don't worry that the margin is in the tank.
Yeah.
I think every HR lead has to have that empathy.
Yeah.
We have to understand what we've signed up for.
Yeah.
You don't want to be, you don't want that variable. Go become a Zen master in a mountain in Peru.
Yeah.
Nobody's forcing you to be the head of HR in a business. Business has that variable too. I think I'm creating massive friction of the two. But I think the first thing that every head of HR, whatever, is they have to have empathy for their CEO. They're playing a different game.
It's fair.
If you want to judge them, you go do the earnings call. You go talk to the board.
Yeah.
You go have somebody come up to you at dinner and yell at you that the stock is down 20% and their life savings is tied in and I trust it. I mean, we have to have empathy.
Yeah.
Our biggest issue right now in our country, let alone the business world, is we have all dug in.
Yeah.
And point fingers without deploying any empathy. And so that's number one.
Love it.
Number two is then if you do that, in my opinion, gives you permission to have a more thoughtful conversation about hidden costs. Let me explain. I believe the most practical way to make HR penetrate to the top, which is what I want.
Yeah.
I want HR to penetrate over CFO in the business world.
Okay.
Because I think it's healthy for the money, not because I'm the Yoda of kindness. I believe that retention, continuity, people spending their 8 hours at work not worrying about the politics, but actually working on the task at hand.
Yeah.
People not watching a YouTube video for 22 minutes at their desk because they're trying to escape their unhappiness. And all the other million examples I could spend the next 8 hours on actually leads to more efficiency and actually does hit your bottom line. CFOs are often more excited to fire somebody to get the short-term dollars off, only to come back 4 months later to pay an outside recruiter a VIG to pay more in the net because they have a number they need to hit in the short term. So we need more thoughtful business talk.
I hear that. So my last question for you, because I tend to be culture obsessed, that's my side gig when I'm not doing this, is I'm helping build culture at LinkedIn. What is your favorite culture tradition at VaynerMedia?
God, I have a lot of them, but I think my favorite one is actually not a tactic. It's the fact that we fired the individual today. It's the fact that 39 different employees walked into my office this week for 10 minutes to just say hello and create context so that when I go into the elevator at Hudson Yards, they feel comfortable saying hello to me instead of looking down at their phone.
Yeah.
It's the fact that the retention numbers at our organization are real, and they're not predicated on the foosball table or the culture day or the diverse hiring strategy. It's predicated on pure intent of building something meaningful in perpetuity, which leads to good behavior.
Thank you. Well, congratulations on all of your incredible success. It's so fun to watch you and also be part of this journey. So thank you for being here, Gary. So good to spend time with you. And please stay tuned for even more from Talent Connect 2019. Good to have you all.